Antoine is not feeling well this evening, so he is absent, but everyone else is present. So we'll move to adjustment of the agenda. Any adjustments to the agenda?
There is no adjustment to the agenda. The discussion of under the new proposed rules of procedure.
Excuse me, but it's virtually impossible to hear with the Russian
I'm sorry.
You should have turned it up.
I don't have a mic, so I apologize.
Thank you.
A discussion of the rules of the procedures to be discussed next month.
Right, and just so everyone can hear, we are adding sample rules of procedure for consideration this afternoon, this evening. These will be procedural rules for the Board of Adjustment. We will be reviewing those during the training session, and no vote is anticipated this evening, but we will be reviewing those rules that have been prepared for our review by by our board attorney. Okay, hearing no other adjustments to the agenda, we'll move to item 3, approval of the minutes. I assume everyone's had a chance to review the minutes from the May 19th meeting. Any corrections? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to approve the May 19th, 2021 Board of Adjustment minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we will now move to item 4, which is a public hearing. We will now open the hearing, and I would ask that anyone who wishes to speak stand, including staff at this point, and be sworn in by our clerk.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just offer one item. I think Kimberly and I discussed this yesterday. It needs to be clear which of the board members comprise the 5 board members that are going to be actually deliberating upon and deciding the case just for vote tally purposes. So I think the record ought to reflect that.
Okay. Do we need to go through the names of those board members?
Just clarify, I know we have 6 of us up here, just identify the alternate and identify that the alternate will be standing by but will not be voting unless some need arises during the meeting.
So we have the 5 board members, 5 voting board members that are present this evening. Our alternate will be standing by, but will not be voting this evening. Our 5 voting board members are present and will be voting. So for the item 2021,
Is there any definitive order?
the staff will make a presentation, the applicant will need to be heard, and then all those wishing to speak in favor or in opposition will be allowed to speak.
One other thing, it's not definitive in the town ordinance whether or not the rules of evidence applies to what evidence is received. Does anybody know the answer to that?
If you like. Sir, the general statutes provide that local government quasi-judicial hearings are not required to follow the strict rules of evidence. There are certain statutes that provide a handful of mandatory requirements, but the overarching requirement is the constitutional requirement to observe all of the due process standards, swearing witness testimony, right to cross-examine, right to be represented by counsel, so on and so forth. Well, there are no code provisions about that, but they are out there in the body of law.
So just again, do the rules of evidence apply? What is it again? That's all.
Strict rules of evidence do not apply.
Thank you.
Okay, those wishing to be heard tonight, including the applicant and staff, please stand and be sworn in.
Did he speak tonight?
You can see it now, so swear me. Here we go. Yes,
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you know? Before you speak, there is a sign, when you oath to speak.
Second.
Okay, we will now call on staff.
Good evening, Chair Bizzle, members of the Board of Adjustments. To introduce myself, my name is Jeff Keynes, one of the land use planners with the town of Clayton. Tonight I'm here to present the Crawford Cook Shop parking variance. It's project number 2021-040-VAR. The request tonight is a variance to the minimum parking standard requirements for restaurants. In particular, the current code talks about one parking space per every 3 seats, which also includes both indoor and outdoor seating for restaurants. The property in question is approximately just over 32,500 square feet, just shy of 3/4 of an acre. It is currently an existing building. It's located down on Main Street specifically at 401 Main Street. And you can see it right there. It's on the corner. Most people will probably recognize it when we go through the PowerPoint presentation. I wanted to show the site plan and the specific code sections. The specific code section that we're talking about tonight is UDC 155.401 subsection C, subsection 2, table 2-4. That does state that restaurants must meet parking requirements of one space for every 3 seats, which again stated includes outdoor seating. The variance request does state that is to allow as much off-street parking as reasonably can be provided, and no foreseeable traffic congestion problems will be created. Below is a site plan that was submitted with the application. Right there, it shows approximately 44 parking spaces, which does include, I believe, 4 handicap parking spaces, both on Main Street and also just near 2nd Street. There is parking next to the building. The question tonight is there are a number of different uses within the building. Each have different times of day for their peak uses, which includes not only restaurant use, which has traditionally been in the late afternoon and evening hours and weekend hours, but there's also office uses which also occupy the building, and their typical hours run from hours of Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. In your packet, hopefully you receive your packet and was able to go through it, and it does spell out the different times, dates of each of the office uses, or each of the uses that are within the building, so we can take a look at the parking and how it may fluctuate during the day and during the specific use that is being used within the building itself. Tonight, as I mentioned, is for the Crawford's Cook Shop, since they are one of the last occupancies of this building, and it's under the new code, and the new code does state that any adjustment to the parking requirement does go through the Board of Adjustment for a variance. Under the old code, pre-160D, that was left open to the director. So there's been a shift. And I think the code was adopted sometime in February. So, for example, if this was being reviewed and finalized in January, it would have been a director's decision, like it was with the Cardinal Little Hombre. And now, since this is post-160D, it is being finalized in front of the Board of Adjustment via a parking variance. So I want to be clear why we're here versus what happened in the recent past. So there's been a shift in state law and also in our development code requirements. And again, here's a view from outside the building. You can see with the mural painted on it. You can see the parking lot that is next to the building. It's currently gravelled. There's no intention of having it paved at this point in time. But there is, as you can see here, the parking next to the building and the Crawford's Cook Shop would occupy the first half of the first floor of the existing building. So for considerations tonight, staff has reviewed the application, believes, finds that the finding of facts have been met, but staff is not going to give a recommendation on this. This is the role of the variance of the board. So this will conclude my staff presentation. It's brief, but I think we've been looking at this for the last couple months due to a technicality in last time, so I want to just conclude here and answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Gaines on the board?
Not currently, but I will later.
Okay.
I'll have questions later.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Now we'll call on the applicant. If you will, please sign the form. Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Hunter Defus with Atlas Stark Holdings. I represent the applicant in this matter.
Mr. Chairman, may I make one comment at this point?
Yes.
Is it Mr., I'm sorry, the pronunciation?
Defus. Yes.
This is just a brief, annoying lawyer comment. The State Bar has issued a formal ruling that representing a business entity applicant in a case such as this in a quasi-judicial hearing can be considered the practice of law if you represent the applicant by making arguments, and if you present evidence, if you examine witnesses, if you cross-examine witnesses, and do generally what lawyers do. There's a problem under that State Bar rule. And the way we typically get around this, if you're willing to acknowledge that you're appearing as a fact witness only in this case, the application and the materials will speak for themselves, and you can respond to questions and you can present factual evidence to be considered. But if you're willing to steer clear of representing the LLC
Yes, sir.
applicant in the sense that a lawyer would represent a client.
I am not acting in any legal capacity.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Good evening, board members, town staff, and members of the public. My name is Hunter Defus. I am the development director of Atlas Stark. I've been involved in the real estate development and construction industry for more than 12 years, and our company's two principals have nearly half a century of development experience. Our mission is to make a meaningful impact in the communities in which we live through investment, development, and management of the built environment. Atlas Stark manages the Barber Building in downtown Clayton, located at 401 East Main Street. And I'm here tonight seeking a variance for the parking requirements of this building to accommodate a new dining establishment that I believe will complement and enhance the downtown business landscape and be a meaningful contributor to the town of Clayton and its residents. The restaurant, Crawford Cook Shop, will be owned and operated by Scott Crawford of Raleigh. Chef Crawford is best known locally for his current restaurants, Crawford & Son and Jolie, but nationally he is known for multiple recognitions and nominations from the James Beard Foundation, a national nonprofit organization whose mission is to celebrate and honor chefs and other leaders in America's food industry. Chef Crawford is a 5-time honoree of the foundation, starting in 2008 as a semifinalist for the Best Chef of the Southeast, for his work at the Cloister Restaurant and Resort in Sea Island, Georgia, a 3-time nominee as Best Chef of the Southeast while he was the head chef at Heron's of the Umstead Hotel in Cary in 2011, 13, and 14, and most recently for his work at Standard Foods in Raleigh in 2016. Chef Crawford approached Atlas Stark last year with the idea to bring a new restaurant to Clayton. After witnessing Clayton's recent growth and having spent time in and around the area, he feels that downtown Clayton is the right place to start with his first expansion outside of Raleigh. Crawford & Son and Jolie are in older rustic buildings that have been rehabilitated in Raleigh. And Scott wants to maintain that feel in his new restaurant and believes that the historic Barber Building holds the character and quality he needs and is in an ideal location. I'm here tonight because we're facing the same issue that many other developers and entrepreneurs seeking to open new businesses in downtown Clayton face: parking. The Barber Building currently houses a hair salon on the first floor, general office space on the second floor, and has existing parking lot with 44 parking spaces that wraps around the building to the east and south side. I recognize that the addition of the Crawford Cook Shop, coupled with the other existing and approved uses, creates a situation where off-street parking does not meet the code requirements for the various uses within the building. We have made every reasonable effort to ensure that adequate parking can be provided, which is not only in the best interest of the town and its residents, but also in Atlas Stark's best interest as a property manager. I believe the existing site parking, coupled with on-street parking and other parking lots in the immediate vicinity, will be more than sufficient to meet the increased demand resulting from this new business. There are several facts that lead me to this conclusion. The first is the operating hours of the various businesses on our property. As I mentioned, the entire second floor is comprised of general office tenants working a standard 9 to 5 workday, whereas Crawford Cook Shop will only be open during dinner hours from 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock, Tuesday through Saturday. Therefore, the customers and the tenants of these businesses will not conflict with each other's parking needs. Similarly, the Hair on Main Salon is open for business until 6 o'clock, Monday through Saturday, but has minimal functional parking needs due to the size and scope of their business. Another fact alleviating the need for additional on-site parking is the availability of on-street parking, as well as various public and private lots near the site. The Horn Square public lot is located catty-corner to the site. There is also an adjacent lot behind Jones Cafe next door to our site, whose operating hours are 6:30 a.m. to 2 o'clock p.m. And the shopping center housing Compare Foods across 2nd Street has a large parking lot from the site. I have been in contact with the neighboring properties regarding the possibility of shared parking agreements and am making every reasonable attempt to ensure that adequate parking is available without disrupting the customers and tenants of our neighbors. Our existing parking lot cannot be expanded to accommodate more spaces. We examined the possibility of a parking deck, but the size constraints are prohibitive and will not allow for a deck, nor do we feel it would be in keeping with the historic nature of the building in downtown. Given the existing infrastructure on site and the surrounding conditions, it is my belief that strict adherence to the parking requirements would create an undue hardship on the property and any business wanting to occupy space there. I recognize that parking in the downtown area is an ongoing problem, and I and Atlas Stark want to address this issue for the long term in a reasonable and logical fashion in conjunction with the town. However, without approval of this variance request, the Barber Building will remain underutilized indefinitely, as no use requiring parking can be approved without this variance. One of the hallmarks of Atlas Stark is our desire to maintain and enhance historic buildings, renovating and adapting them to modern uses rather than tearing down and rebuilding. The Barber Building is one of the oldest buildings in downtown, and it is our desire to preserve as much of that history and character as possible, but that necessitates that we work within certain limitations. Our proposal is simple. We're investing hundreds of thousands of dollars to renovate and repair the entire building, not just Mr. Crawford's space, to make sure that it's ready to serve Clayton and its residents for the next 40-plus years. But to do that, we have to utilize our existing parking for all of our tenants, both current and proposed. We've made all reasonable efforts to explore alternative options and will continue to work with our neighbors for mutually beneficial arrangements, and we'll work with town officials moving forward to help ameliorate the downtown experience for its residents. Therefore, I respectfully request that this board approve our variance request and allow this project to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dees. I'll now turn it to the board for questions for the applicant.
I have a question.
Mr. Sims.
Yes, so my question has to do with the operating hours. What's in place to, I guess, stop from not to start open up at lunch, start changing the times to lunchtime?
Well, currently there's no actual ordinance in place that would prevent him from opening during lunch. And this is what, his current restaurants in Raleigh, Crawford and Son and Jolie are purely dinner operations. He does not currently own and operate anything that serves lunch. And that's what his continued interest is to serve dinner.
But you agree that there's nothing in place to stop him from opening up during lunch?
I would have to agree with that, yes. At some point in the future, he could potentially want to do lunch.
Mr. Satterfield?
You mentioned that you'd been working on parking agreements with surrounding parking, private parking areas. Have you come up with any yet?
So we have not been able to get any commitments from anybody. The family that owns the Compare Foods lot, we have had very constructive dialogue with them. I believe their operating hours end at around 8:30, and so they have indicated a willingness to talk about something that would be mutually beneficial, as we realize that people will in fact park wherever they can and walk to where they're going. So we would prefer, we actually have people that park in our parking lot currently to go to neighboring establishments. And we would prefer to work congenially with our neighbors rather than having to put up signage or try to enforce some kind of parking limitation. And so we would we're actively working with the neighbors. We don't have anything concrete in place right now.
Do they own the whole building, the dollar store downstairs too?
Yes, the entire property.
I have a couple questions, kind of piggyback on what Mr. Satterfield said. I'd be interested about the shared parking agreements, but obviously they're not in place yet. And the reservation for parking, I'm thinking, am I hearing correctly that there will not be a reservation for parking for Crawford's and a reservation for other restaurants in the building as currently proposed, as far as signed parking spaces for this restaurant only, or what?
So that's correct right now, and that's really because we don't, in fact, know, first of all, if this is going to happen, but secondly, how this would actually play out in actuality. So our thought process is, as I mentioned in my presentation, that our concern is certainly for our tenants, first and foremost, because if our customers, or if our tenants and their customers can't park, then that's a problem for us. And so we would be proactive in making sure that if we needed to do some signage, that we would. However, just given the abstract nature of how that's going to work out in the long term, we can't really define that out right now.
Understand. Mr. Perricone.
In follow-up first to Mr. Sin's question in terms of operating hours, are there anything in place with respect to the leases that themselves that would restrict the tenants from changing operating hours?
Where?
Okay. If that was something that was requested, would that be considered on the part of the landlord?
It would be, yes. But I would have to go back and actually look at the leases themselves, so, yeah.
Okay. Second, was any consideration given to valet parking with some off-site location beyond just neighboring locations? And often you see that in urban downtowns where the parking is very far away. You valet park and they take your car and you hope it comes back.
We have thought about and discussed that. We have not identified a reasonably close area that would be feasible to do valet parking. So, part of what we would like to do is move forward. We recognize that this is a broader problem that faces downtown Clayton, and we want to be a long-term neighbor and steward here. Looking at some possibility of a parking deck and a joint venture is something that we are really open to. However, as the current infrastructure allows, it doesn't we have some valet agreements at some properties in Raleigh, and they are typically directly across the street, whereas that doesn't really exist here. So that's not really something that we think we can feasibly do and put in place right now with the existing infrastructure.
Okay, and my only thought was, there's a pretty big new parking lot right behind this building, so I didn't know if any exploration had taken place with the town with respect to.
But it's a brand-new parking lot, and so we'd be happy to talk to the town about that. And I know you guys don't use it after, well, 7 or 8 o'clock on certain nights of the week, but no, that's something that, again, we would be happy to look at that. What we're trying to do right now is try to really to work within the confines of what the site gives us, and try to work that out with the property that we have.
Got a little follow-up question here. We know what the code requires, and we know what the variance is, and we know how many spaces are potentially available. As far as this use particularly, do you have an idea of what realistically is required based on past experience?
The load occupancy calculation, I believe, was around 150 seats. And that includes the outdoor patio that we've proposed as well as the indoor seating. So that would roughly equate to 40 to 50, spaces. As it sits now with the existing and approved uses with the upstairs office space, the Harold and Main Salon, and the Cardinal and the Little Hombre restaurants, we're already kind of at what code would allow. So we do think, though, that given the fact that most of the spaces are occupied currently by the second floor office tenants during the day, they're vacant during night. We also have we have people that park in our parking lot to go to neighboring businesses. And again, to my earlier point, we're not interested in trying to enforce some, 401 main only parking. But we do feel like this is going to be adequate to serve. And I think if, in working with our neighbors, I think we can work out a mutually beneficial arrangement. It's just, again, we're working with some pretty tight site constraints.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
For that side of the building, what has been in there most recently? It doesn't seem like it's being maximized at its greatest potential until now, potentially.
Correct. So most recently, it was a retail shop that has moved across the street, and the name escapes me. But prior to that, it was the Flipside restaurant. And so there is an existing kitchen there that's being rehabbed and renovated to serve Mr. Crawford's space. So we're really just kind of renovating it and restoring it to not its prior use, but its historical use as a restaurant.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think without objection, I'd like to have staff come back just for a couple questions, and then we'll hear from the audience. Jeff, just looking back in the staff commentary, we obviously know this building was built many, many years ago under different codes and ordinances. I think I know the answer to this, but I know there was some staff commentary in there about what, was built under different codes and ordinances. Do we have any idea what those requirements were back then, if there were parking requirements? Just to be clear in what's in the record.
Jeff Keynes, Town of Clayton. To my understanding, when these buildings were built a number of years ago, zoning requirements, parking requirements were not an issue. They were not addressed. In many cases, they weren't even mentioned because it wasn't, in some cases, they just didn't have cars. Many older historical areas of many downtowns, including Clayton, cars, vehicle traffic were not a factor in the buildings. Hence, you see a lot of them that are zero line setbacks, a lot of illegal non-conforming uses nowadays. So many people would just park on the street, and even then, you can look at some historical areas where streets were even kind of an afterthought for vehicles, so they're kind of squished in there. So in this case, to my understanding, that vehicles were not, vehicle parking requirements were not at issue when the building was originally constructed.
Thank you.
Mr. Gaines, I have a question. There's a parking lot, a town parking lot, basically across the street, I guess, the Horn parking lot. How many spaces are in that lot?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Sorry.
I'm looking at Patrick to see if we can look at that if we can get that information to you shortly.
Are there any requirements for overnight parking or long-term parking in that lot that this applicant could use as a?
I mean,
There's not.
Mr. Satterfield shaking his head. I don't, it would want to be a police issue if it's overnight parking. But to my understanding, there's no overnight parking within the town. It's usually for current use. So if you're out late, you can park there, but parking overnight would most likely be prohibited.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Gaines? Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. We'll now ask for those in favor of this request to come forward. And I would ask that although we do not have time constraints, we do ask that your comments be limited to those comments that are factual and are relevant to the case before us this evening. So, and make sure that if you do wish to speak that you were sworn in. If not, we can have Chrissy, the clerk, sign you in. So anyone in favor of this variance would like to speak? Okay, hearing none, I'm sorry?
I'm in favor of the variance, and I'd like.
Would you like to speak?
I'm sworn in, though.
Okay, clerk can swear you in.
I'll just read it. If you can just raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge only?
Yes.
And then just make sure you sign up.
My name is Howard Manning, and appreciate y'all taking some time to listen to me. And by the variance, I approve it for it. I do want to bring new business to the area. I do not want vagrant parking. I deal with it on a regular daily basis, and it is a big problem for our town. And I think there has been numerous deck proposals, and I really hope that we utilize their proposal as well as, you know, I'd love to make a personal contribution to a deck, and I think we've got a lot of good areas to do that. And I think it would be super duper lucrative, and you could make it so attractive for downtown, and even put, you know, retail stores in the front of it, 1 underground level, 4 above, pay for itself in less than 10 years. I really think it would be a super idea, and I hope I'm not out of place saying that, but I've got drawings, and I'd love to admit them, and I've spoken with him about them, and people are going to park where they're going to park. You're not going to stop them. So either you're going to make an agreement with somebody or you're not, and I wish him well in agreements. I know I have one, and I love it, and I cherish it, but it gets abused by vagrant people on the daily. I can't tell you how many nails and stuff I pick up from, you know, CMC, and I mean they park in that circle. They don't need to be there. You know, I mean it's just a constant battle, and we can fight it together. And this is an amazing town that's growing at so rapid. It's not even funny. So I hope that everybody can come to a consensus where it's not, I know that for a fact, I spoke with Mr. Jones myself and came up with some figures that would alleviate about 40 of the spots right off the bat. So I think we can do this thing.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. Could I get you to just state your address just for the record?
1101 Deer Run,
Clayton, thank you.
Clayton, North Carolina, 27520.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the variance? Okay, anyone would like to speak in opposition? State your name and address, please.
Indulge me for a moment, please. If we had more time, we'd have had them in the notebook. I'm sorry. This is a pivotal issue in the growth and sustaining the existing quality of the downtown business parking. You heard from,
Alan, could I interrupt just a minute, just for the record? Could you give your
you
name
need
and
my
address,
name,
please?
so forth.
I think we know you, but if you
I'm sorry.
could state it for the record, please.
Excuse me, Chairman Bizzle. My name is Alan Tew. I'm 77 years old. I grew up in Clayton. I went to law school. I returned home to Clayton in the fall of 1971, where I have practiced law continuously since then. I have maintained an office in this area within 1 block of the Barber Building. One was at the corner of Barber and Street and across from the old town hall. The other was up where, beside Howard's Restaurant. And then for the last 37 years, I've been in my current office located across the street diagonally from the lot in question. It's at 202 South Lombard Street. And over those years, I have maintained and still maintained a daily full schedule. So I have seen that parking lot, the evolution of the area, and am intimately familiar with what I've seen, can relate, and the problem that exists. So I think about when I used to clean my dad's office, which was upstairs over what is now, he wasn't a lawyer, he was a dentist, but upstairs over where the bricks and mortar is. And I remember one day we were looking out one of the windows down on Main Street, and he looked at me, I had kind of a dry wit, and he said, well, son, you can tell it's Christmas in Clayton. You can find a parking street downtown most any place you want. So the problem then was at the other end of the spectrum. We had more parking spaces than parkers. Now we're at the other end of the spectrum. So with that, I want you to look at what I have compiled. And one, I think, just as a matter of suggestion, to come here before you without addressing the issue, which is obvious, and that is spillover parking, is somewhat presumptuous, and that if any variance is granted, that it should only be with strict performance standards for the applicant. I have tried to get a reservation at the restaurant in Raleigh, and he's preeminently successful. So I think he will be a good fit here, and I'm certainly happy to see the growth that we've had, and I thank the Downtown Development Association and the core businesses who have been here throughout this time to provide the basis upon which to build. And I will have one comment. Mr. Keynes has been quite responsive and quite helpful. When I've called, I've gotten a call back. We've discussed issues. I've gotten information, and that is a wonderful transformation from my experience when dealing with all of them. So the opposition here is based on an issue, and that issue is what is going to happen with the spillover parking. Now, when I first read this thing, and I thought, well, that's nice. They're going to be there from 4 until 11, so most people will be gone. And the grocery store across the street closes at 8 p.m., so that's good. But the one thing that was mentioned right off the bat was there seems to be some presumption there is an obligation for the private owners, the owners of the private parking, which includes me and the dental office. We've got 26 spaces in there to give them the, or to be obligated, or to have the presumption that they have the right for their customers to use it. My clients don't park over in that lot, and if they did, you would certainly want to address that. So if you will look at the first parking analysis of the application. Now, I read this thing closely, and let me tell you what isn't in there. The hours, you have to sit down and read it, the hours that are going to be operating. And so you look at first, though, they've got 21 existing offices on the 21 spaces allocated for the existing offices on the second floor. I don't know how they arrived at that, because the restaurant formula cited in the code is for every 3 seats, you have 1 space required. So we're just looking at what's there. 6 for the hair salon. And again, it's unknown how that is calculated. Then we get to the restaurant, and this is somewhat interesting. It states, and somebody needs to answer the question, are we looking at adding 59 for Little Ombre and 27 for Crawford? Are Little Ombre and the Cardinal, who are going to be in there now at the same time, are they already granted the spaces? In any event, let's assume that this request is granted. They would need, you got, with the current statistics cited in there, 86 current seats needed, okay? It doesn't say how Little Ombre and the Cardinal got 59. Then you got an additional request of 27 seats. So are we looking at 59 and 27, or are we looking at just 27? It's not clear. The second thing, let's assume it's all adding up. That's 113 total spaces needed. 69 spaces short. So this calculation does not include any staffing, anybody, and they don't run by themselves. So where's the staff going to park? Now, if you look at exhibit number 2 and the attachment, Mr. Yarborough with the town was kind enough to give me the requested information so I could reverse engineer what we're talking about in terms of daytime competition hours. And by the way, there was some mention of no safety concern. I can tell you from personal experience that traffic is a huge issue on Main Street, and safety is an issue. On Friday, May the 17th, 2019, I left my office, walked up on Lombard Street, the west sidewalk, was crossing Main Street. There was traffic on Main Street, and when I got just short of halfway, a white car gunned it, beating, and he told the police officer he was beating a yellow light. I got hit, and it was like a scene from a Bruce Willis movie. It hit me right in the groin here, threw me up on the hood of the car, across on the windshield, and my eye underneath here hit the driver's side mirror, and I was thrown to the ground. I had just finished my rehab for left rotator cuff surgery shortly before that, and I had second rotator cuff surgery in July of 2019. So tell me it's not traffic is not a problem. It's not safe. So just looking at traffic and what's going to be generated, hopefully, that's to consider. Then on the second one, I looked at each of the restaurants within a one-block area. You have Jones Cafe, and their parking borders on the back side of this, but the ownership, and they have not been connected to my knowledge, William Jones in Greenville, who owns it, and his kin folks use it. I talked with Burr's wife, Crystal, today. They use that lot back there. Nobody has contacted any of them. Don't you think that would have been a good idea coming here? Nobody, to my knowledge, and I can stand to be corrected. I've talked with Ava, and I've talked with her about this and what I'm presenting, and she is in accord. I don't know that she has had any constructive conversations about using her lot over there. But if you look at this, you'll see that with Jones Cafe, which is beside one door down, Manning's, which is across the street, Little Ombre and Cardinal, and I've reverse engineered the seats there, and I've reverse engineered the seats at Manning's. And then Nana's, which is down beside Hometown Realty, less than a block away, and Clayton Steak, you're looking at a total of 666 seats, which creates 222 spaces, and, 222, and you deal with that, and you've got spillover spaces, 69 spillover spaces, and there are 44 spaces at this site. I've attached to that the response from Mr. Yarborough with the numbers. So you've got competing during the daytime, and think about this. You've got 26 of those 44 spaces during the daytime during these competing hours, which I have put on here, in which people most likely will be parked. So what does that tell you about the pressure and the spillover? You've got on number 3, the evening spaces. And you've got 217 seats, and that, see, 27, you still got a 69 seat spillover for 44 spaces there. It looks like it generates 248 seats, 648 seats. 217 spaces. That's a lot of parking. I've been down there almost every day for 38 years. Yeah. I have enjoyed the growth in Clayton. I have appreciated it, but I do believe that to grant this variance would impose an undue burden on the neighbors. That would include me, and Ava has always called it. When the flip side was there, the flip side would have a big night and they'd spill over at Ava's. Sometimes I'd have some in my lot, not many, not often, but you're looking at people who don't care in many instances, and so you've got cleanup in your lot, and it imposes a burden. So then what does one do? Now think about what happens when a restaurant opens. You can't get in. There will be a mountain of spillover when this thing opens, and usually things die down. But it is, I think, an unfair, more than a variance. You might as well eviscerate the code if you're going to do that. And I think about this parking lot back here is an indication of the parking problem. The town saw a need, and God intervened and assisted in the form of Horn Memorial United Methodist Church, and so to carry the spillover from their services on conflicting nights and the Clayton Center, we got a roadblock that is a major artery for the EMS and the fire department to access east, and a nice new parking lot here. So the town needs to address this issue, and perhaps in the form of some code action. They didn't propose a parking deck because the cost per space was 3 times the cost of doing what they've done. So There is, and I didn't make a copy of it for you, but there's a 2007 summary, or executive summary by Todd Brooks, March 26, 2007, which was prepared, and it has a lot of information and a lot of things I think that would be of a benefit. But one of the things I noted in here is that the most results of parking surveys, interviews, the most popular destinations in the downtown area are the restaurants and the retail stores. Well, I don't know there's a whole lot of retail, but anyway, you've got restaurants that are within a block of this, and they command space. It could set Crawford and Son up for failure. The failure rate, I think, for restaurants is 85% the first year, and then it flips 15% for subsequent years. But let's say that you have this success, and of course, the concentration of this in this building, which I've known of, I've seen every use in it for my lifetime, has never been as intense as it is now. It was a feed and seed in the back where the flip side was. It was a hardware store up front where most of the other stuff is. And then when Swade Jr. retired, there have been various uses in there, but nothing with the intensity of this use. So I think that it is without any firm written agreements, something that should be denied. I would invite somebody to talk with these people and talk with me. I'm certainly, again, I want to see things unfold, but to follow with one of the things that was related to me, well, Clayton, there are other businesses wanting to come down to downtown Clayton, but parking is an issue. So it's here. And then finally, the last exhibit is Exhibit 5, and that was the best I could get, but the Cardinal is a bar. And so if you're looking at a bar, what kind of bar is it? Is it going to be a sports bar? I mean, your turnover time for tables in these types of restaurants, bars, things like that differ. And you got to figure, in addition to the need for spaces, the transition period when you've got people coming in and waiting. So I don't know about Little Hombre, but I would ask if somebody could tell me first, is Little Hombre or Little Hombre and the Cardinal, do they have a vested right to the 59 spaces that are attributed to them on the application? First question. Second question then follows, are we looking at asking for 86 or just 27? In either event, the end result, I think, is an undue burden on each of the people. And I believe that they have an obligation of proving by a 4/5 majority of each of the 4 criteria set out in the application. I don't believe that it rises to the level, even with somewhat of a nebulous standard of proof in the statute. So thank you for your public service and tolerating. I just wanted to make sure that there was a thorough and a detailed record portrayed for you as this matter moves forward. Thank you. I'll be glad to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tu, and without objection, we will enter your exhibits and your testimony into the record.
Okay, now, one other thing. I see here some people I have talked with, and some of them are owners. If any of you all are owners in the area and you wish to be heard or to make any comment as to whether or not you agree or disagree with what you've heard here, please stand, identify yourself, okay? I need to sign this.
Anyone else wish to speak in opposition to the variance?
Good evening. My name is Donovan Spence. This is my sister Sharon Whitley Spence Whitley, something. Anyway, we're the children of Ava Spence, the owner of the shopping center, and we just want to go on record that we're against this variance. I have had conversation once with Hunter, waiting on an offer, haven't heard anything back, so I definitely want the restaurant to come, but I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I think Alan, too, described it. Clayton has a parking problem. We all know it. The sooner we fix it, the better off everyone will be. But like Howard said, I don't want to be in the parking business, but I know that's where that's going to come. And I will be in the parking business. And somebody will know who I am. So anything I can do to help, we're here for discussions. But it's simple math. Code does change also from what it was in the past or whatever. But we're here for a solution. So let's get together. The sooner we get together, the better off for everyone and for future businesses to come. So thank you.
Thank you, Donovan. Could you give us your address just for the record?
331 Hereford Drive, Clayton.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Don't send me any bills, please.
And I'm Sharon Spence Whitley, brother. He's my brother. So my mom is Ava Spence. She is the owner of the property. She is getting chemotherapy treatments right now. So she's in round 2 this week. So hence why she's asked us to come up here and speak for her. She is not able to come up here. But she has made it very clear that she does not want to allow her parking lot to be used. I know Donovan, like I said, has spoken already, and so she's kind of a little bit perturbed at him that he kind of gave the, well, tell us what you would offer so far as money to park there. But ultimately, she is the one that's responsible, not us, for paying to have the parking lot paved, to have it cleaned. There are businesses that right now do use it. We definitely know the parade and the Harvest Festival, definitely people use it. I use it whenever I go uptown to do these things. I know I have attempted to go to Manny's restaurant, which I dearly love. Go there at least once a week. Sometimes there's no parking in Horns Circle or on the street, and I have parked at my mom's shopping area and walked across. So I feel like I'm obligated, that I'm able to do that. But again, others are also doing that. I notice that. I know sometimes I've wanted to go to Jones's. That little parking lot is packed. Main Street's packed. I'll park over there at the store and I'll walk across. So if I'm doing it, I know others are too. And I know that the town of Clayton has had some of their big trucks that have also used her parking area, especially that corner area that's not with the Super 10 or the Compare Food. And I know that sometimes when she has felt up to it, she has driven up there and she has told them to move their big vehicles, and they have moved them. So it is being utilized. She knows it's in the heart of downtown Clayton. We want to see downtown Clayton grow, but we don't want to be the ones that are responsible, especially for her insurance and her coming out of her pocket for maintaining that. So some of this burden does need to be falling back on the town of Clayton, so far as finding other parking avenues. Because we are growing, there are lots of little boutiques and businesses that I do frequent. So I do come up to the farmer's market on Saturday, and I was able to parallel park right on Main Street, which was kind of a shocker to me. I thought I was going to go back and park in the store, walk uptown, but it didn't have to. So, but thank you for listening to us. But we definitely are against it unless something can be done, with the town of Clayton. And my address is 317 Hereford Drive in Clayton. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
Okay, what is that?
Have your answer.
Okay, how many spots?
If you'd like to
Yes, please.
address.
Again, Jeff Keynes, Town of Clayton. I just wanted to reply to the answer to Mr. Casey. The question was, how many parking spaces are in Horn Street Square? We counted on Google Earth, it's approximately 30. And according to Google Earth photo, we counted approximately 12 parking spaces on North Lombard. So a total of 42 on the north side next to Horn Square.
Okay.
A follow-up question of that, Jeff, sorry. Is there any requirements for parking at that Horn Square right now? So, I mean, is there any regulations, time limits, overnight parking?
I don't know.
think I asked that a little bit
Again, I
earlier.
don't know if there's overnight parking due to ordinances. I would probably refer that to the police. To my knowledge, is public parking. Anyone has the ability to park there for uses that are in downtown.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
Currently, there's no signs for overnight parking or time limit or anything.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
Can I get an answer to the two questions that I posed?
I think that was dealing with Little Ombre and Cardinal. Was that your?
I asked, what are we dealing with here? 27 or 86? For example, in the application, it states the basic need, the current need, and it includes in that 59 for Little Ombre and the Cardinal. And so I want to know if they are already vested as a matter of right, or are they a part of this application which specifically requests 27?
Jeff, if you'd like to address that, I would like to just make it clear that we are, while this may have some impact on it, we are looking directly at the Crawford variance for this one. But Jeff, if you have that information you'd like to share with us.
Yes, again, Jeff Keynes, Town of Clayton. Tonight's application focuses strictly on the Crawford Cookhouse. The applicants requested 27, variance of 27. As I stated in my presentation, prior to the 160D change, it was a director's decision. And so that was already, the Little Ombre and the Cardinal was taken care of with the previous director. So tonight, staff strictly focuses on Crawford Cookhouse only.
Thank you.
Yep.
Then there's one follow-up. What was the effective date? Yes, excuse me. What was what statute, what ordinance was in effect at the time that the prior director granted the 59 spaces? I'm unaware that there have been, I would have gotten something. There's been no prior request for a variance, so I want to know what the basis, what authority that the prior planning director had to grant those 59 spaces.
Go ahead, Jeff. I might follow up with that.
Under the previous code, under the, I say pre-160D, I believe it was 160A, Our code, our UDC code states specifically that the director has the ability to waive the parking requirement. I believe the updated code was adopted, I believe, I'm going to say the third Monday, which was February 15th of 2021. And in that code, it states that parking requirements may be waived via variance through the Board of Adjustment. So it transferred on that date with the adoption of 160D. There were some code changes. That's the effective date of the code change, and that is what we have been reviewing parking variances ever since.
Thank you, Jim.
I've got a question for staff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got a question for staff. Yes, what I've got here is the code for Town of Clayton says the planning director may approve a deviation from site elements requirement so long as the modifications to the elements are moving in the direction of conformity. I'd like the things addressed in this. The site plan that they approved, they have no parking, no paving in the parking. They have no islands every 10 spaces. The access point is not, was it 20 or 24 feet, supposed to be 20, 24 feet? I believe we have 18 feet. The dumpsters are not enclosed. There was a whole lot of things that were given on this site, and I'm not saying I'm against everything that was given. I'm just saying I would like to know what moving in the direction of conformity they are doing.
Sure, a good question. One thing that staff has not done is close out the land use application for the Cardinal and Ombre. They're under renovation now. So part of that site plan requirement was to do some extra landscaping to enclose the dumpster area as in the corner right there. So that application from the land use perspective has not been signed off as complete and closed by the planning department. And it will not be signed off and closed until they meet all requirements at the time, which includes a lot more landscaping and to enclose the dumpster areas, because that was actually one of our concerns as well. At the time, I believe, speaking with the prior director, she mentioned that there was going to be a study looking at the dumpster requirements for the downtown area. And so I believe that was the paradigm that she was under, that would be taken care of in a future code update for downtown, for dumpster areas and trash receptacles in the downtown area. As for the issue of parking, for the pavement of parking, which is another good question, we've had internal discussions, and one thing we have to balance as planners is what the impact of the application is versus what kind of exactions we can require or request from the applicant. Rough proportionality, and has been taken up to the Supreme Court, and it's always rational nexus and rough proportionality. Rough proportionality, just a brief 10 seconds. I think it's Nolan versus City of Tigard, which Pacific Northwest, my neck of the woods, very familiar with that. And basically it states that you cannot go above reaching for extra exactions, i.e. paving a parking lot, if they're only going to do minor modifications. What is the impact of the development onto the exactions which you can request? We have spoken, at least myself, I've spoken with Patrick Pierce, who's the Economic Development Director, spoken with the applicant about paving the parking lot. In reviewing this, our internal discussions, we find that having some external renovations does not meet the burden to pave in a parking lot. As part of it, though, they're supposed to put in wheel stops to help identify these are parking spaces. We do recognize that it is gravel, which is a challenge, especially when there's no physical stripes on the ground. But we were trying to teeter on that fine line between what is rough and proportional, what can we require from the applicant. And we didn't find paving an entire parking lot where some external modifications reach that level, especially if they're just going to put a restaurant and upgrade a restaurant to a restaurant. So it's a long-winded question for a quick land use decision from the Supreme Court.
So Jeff, I guess in summary, the request from the applicant is not sufficient to require a site plan, a minor site plan, or a major site plan by the town, is that correct? Where all of these issues would need to be brought up to code?
Yeah, it didn't rise to that level. If it was a brand-new building, not a problem.
Right.
But because it is existing building, the impact which this restaurant would create on the surrounding infrastructure did not rise to a level of paving an entire parking lot.
Right.
And we do not use dollar figures into that conclusion. It's just the Supreme Court would state what is roughly proportional to the impact.
Staff has determined it's internal and exterior building renovations. Right.
Correct.
Thank you.
And we try to avoid the word takings a lot because that goes into a whole new Supreme Court legal things, and I'm sure our attorneys would greatly would talk to us about takings and what it means to the town.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Have you been involved with any of the councilmen concerning downtown parking at this point? I know there's a few councilmen that want things changed and don't know whether it's gotten to you yet.
It is not given to me directly. I have attended a couple council meetings, which the issue of downtown parking has been raised. We have not been given, planning staff has not been given direction to look at this. We feel that it's coming, but officially we have not been given a direction from the council to take a close look at this thing. But we are gearing up. We have done some preliminary studies of the surrounding cities that are comparable size. But when we are given direction from the town council, then we are prepared to move forward with an ad hoc committee, if you will, to take a closer look at this specific issue. This is not the first time downtown has come up. We've heard the concerns. We're preparing some homework ready to go. So when we are given that specific direction, we're ready to take off in a moment's notice.
Thank you, Jeff.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Sure. I think it's reasonable probably to point out, and I imagine the board knows this, that given the standards for granting the variance that are the yardstick for the case, you're going to have to accept the code as it is now written. I think everyone knows there are bigger issues that the council may want to address concerning what to do about parking in the future, but for purposes of this variance request, you have to accept the language that is in the code right now and the requirements for parking that you find in the code.
Thank you, Red. Thank you, Jeff. And before we close this public hearing, I'd like to, first of all, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, before we close the hearing, I'd like to give the applicant an opportunity to rebut. Any rebuttal?
Hunter Deefus, Atlas Stark. No specific rebuttals. As I mentioned before, we have made some preliminary reaching out to neighbors, the Spence family included. Mr. Spence was on the neighborhood meeting call. I thought we had a very constructive dialogue. We certainly can't commit to any kind of parking agreement until we know what we're going to be allowed to do. I think that there's been a bigger issue here, which is the downtown Clayton parking problem. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we would love to be help be a solution to that problem. However, what's at issue here, in my opinion, not as a lawyer, but just in my personal opinion, is that we are working within the site constraints of an existing building with an existing parking lot. We have looked at paving it. Paving it would not increase the parking at all. In fact, I think it would decrease it because we would need to bring it up to code. We would need to add islands. We would not be able to have, I think there are 20-plus spots in a row on each side on that east side now, and we would have to separate those 10 spots per island, between islands. So we would actually have to decrease it. Not to mention we would create a new stormwater runoff issue that I've spoken with Susan Locklear about. She's willing to work with us. We're working with her on the canopy issue, which I think at the end of the day, we are increasing the square footage here because we are adding a patio. To Mr. Tu's point, yes, this does not involve the Cardinal or Little Hombre at all, because they are rebuilding a patio on an existing impervious surface. There was no parking variance that was required. It was approved. It is underway. We are adding some outdoor seating, especially I think we can all agree that outdoor seating is at a premium right now with restaurant space with COVID. And so this is an important component of the project. I think that if we were not adding this patio, we would not actually be here today for a parking variance if we were just maintaining the square footage as is. That being said, we are adding roughly 500 square feet of patio space that will be covered. It will be stormwater mitigated with gutters into a dry well. We have received comments from the site submission from the town planning department. We are working through that with Mr. Keynes and his department. I think we will adequately address those. There were not any abnormal comments that came up. I think the dumpster enclosure was one comment that was made. That will be enclosed. There will be more landscaping added around that dumpster. There will be landscaping added along Lombard Street. We have demolished the 1940s, I think, is what we've guesstimated at. The mural that was on the side of the building, we are going to spend roughly $25,000 to replace that mural with a new painted mural on the side of the building. We have been through a preliminary meeting with the Public Art Advisory Board, and that will be going before City Council on the 21st. Mr. Crawford will be around to talk about that as well. So I think, just not as a rebuttal, but just in closing, that I'd like to kind of reiterate, we are here to be good stewards of the community, and we want to do something that contributes overall to the environment and the downtown community. So I do think that this is a problem that we all need to face kind of in a larger macro aspect. But I don't think that holding this particular project up would further that goal in any particular way. And it might actually be counterintuitive in the fact that if there, as I mentioned earlier, if there is no variance granted, this roughly quarter of that floor of the building will remain vacant indefinitely. There is no use that we can put in there that doesn't require some level of parking. And as it's approved now, we have to have a variance with the existing uses. We're already at a parking threshold. So I would respectfully, again, ask that this variance be granted. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, before we close the hearing, I'd like to ask the clerk, without objection, to enter all testimony and exhibits into the record. So hearing none.
Mr. Chairman, that should probably include the application and the attachments to the application and any written documentary materials that were handed out today, not just testimony.
All right. Thank you. All right, with that, I'll close the public hearing, bring the discussion back to the table. And I think what we'd like to do is to take each one of these findings of fact one by one and for discussion by the board, and if there's no objection to that, and we'll just, we'll start with finding of fact one. And I'll just read those off, and please feel free to enter your comments. Finding of fact one, unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the ordinance. It shall not be necessary to demonstrate that. In the absence of the variance, no reasonable use can be made of the property. You have the applicant's response and the staff commentary in the staff report. Any discussion on finding of fact one?
Mr. Chair, based on the findings of fact and the testimony from the applicant, I feel that they have met number one based on the hardship.
Anyone else on finding of fact 1? All right, let's go down to finding of fact 2. I'll read that. The hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as location, size, or topography. Hardships resulting from personal circumstances, as well as hardship resulting from conditions that are common to the neighborhood or the general public, may not be the basis for granting a variance. Discussion on finding fact 2. And I think what we have heard tonight, I'll just start with the site is very peculiar. It is an older building that you've heard staff's testimony obviously was approved under a much earlier code. These regulations that we are faced with today were not in place at that time. There are definitely constraints to the property size as far as meeting the parking requirements. So I think the hardship, there is some hardship that results just specific to this property in the size, location, that at one time was conforming and may not necessarily meet all the requirements of the code today since they have changed.
I just want to be noted down that I echo the same things, that I feel that the hardship is a result of this particular property because of the age, that I note the same thing.
Thank you.
I would agree as well. This is a historic building in the historic district. It's contributing. It was built circa 1905, and it's landlocked with historic buildings around it as well. And he's limited by what he has to work with.
Any other comments on hardship finding of fact number 2? All right, we'll move to finding of fact number 3. The hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. The act of purchasing property with knowledge that circumstances exist that may justify the granting of a variance shall not be regarded as self-created hardship. Comments on number 3? Well, I think one thing, the building is obviously existing. The applicant has testified to the improvements that they are preparing to make. The actual improvements do not constitute a major or minor site plan by the town, thus requiring them to come in and retrofit the entire site. So I think that's something important to keep in mind, that these are considered exterior and interior building, not necessarily the site itself. And I think staff has testified to that. Any other comments on finding of fact number 3? Okay, we'll move to number 4. The requested variances are consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is received. Comments on finding of fact number 4? I think one thing that stands out with me is the staff commentary, that the proposed variance meets the purpose of the UDO by allowing a reduced parking standard in the downtown area by allowing the applicant to place as much parking as reasonably possible. I think we are very aware by the evidence what parking is required versus what is actually can be put on the property. It's my understanding that parking agreements, shared parking agreements are been sought, although they are not in place yet.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just give a bit of legal context. In addition to the 4 findings of fact, which are essentially the legal criteria that you apply the evidence to in rendering your decision, in addition to the 4 statutory and UDC requirements, you've got provisions of the code, the UDO, that are quoted on page 33 of the staff handouts. And those criteria of Code Section 155-204 sub 5 state that there may be an allowance for the parking variance so long as much off-street parking and loading as can reasonably be provided is provided, and no foreseeable traffic congestion problems will be created. That is from the UDC, and I think it's fair to use that to apply those code standards as supplements to the 4 findings or criteria for granting a variance in general. So you have 4 general statutory / code requirements, or findings, if you will, and those 2 code-based determinations that I think it's fair to say supplement the 4 general standards.
Thank you. Additional discussion by the board?
I'd just like to say, Mr. Tu and Mr. and Mrs. Spence, I think y'all bring very valid points tonight. I think what you're talking about is more of a town issue than an issue in regards to this particular applicant. This applicant obviously has some hardships regarding space constraints, land constraints. It's a historic building built in, like I said, circa 1905, and you know, I'm in favor of granting the variance.
I'll concur with Porter. I respect everyone and the opinions they brought tonight and the issues. I think anybody that's living in Clayton is well aware of most of this. Again, it's larger than the particular request here. I think it's fair to say that if you open a business in downtown, you're going to have parking issues, and it is larger than, I believe, this board's responsibility to address those. So along with Mr. Casey, I'm in support of the variance request.
Thank you, Mr. Harrigan.
I'd just like to say that I do hear the concerns, and I do feel that they are strongly valid concerns. A couple of things. The town is going to have to address this in some way, shape, or form. I am in favor of the, as far as with the variance, but with conditions. I do think that we have to start looking at something, and I think that, and I don't know which way or how with the conditions as far as how we will put it in there or whatever, as far as with the hours. I think if that's what they're saying that their hours are going to be, I think it has to be placed. I don't know if in the lease or however, but I would approve with conditions.
I guess on that, Mr. Attorney, since these hours are, have been placed into evidence and the staff report as far as the applicants' hours that they have provided, is that sufficient to require those hours to be maintained?
I think it would need to be included in your decision in the case. You have the legal authority to deny the application, to grant the application, or to grant the application, but with conditions. And I hesitate to suggest what you might consider, but those conditions are in the record. They've been discussed this evening, and you could attach as part of your decision a condition to the granting of the variance.
Okay, thank you.
Or conditions.
Thank you. Ms. Satterfield, any comments?
You know, I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I've owned property on Main Street for a lot of years. I think my memory's not as good as Mr. Chu's. And by the way, glad you're okay. I hope you won your lawsuit. Just saying. But to put myself in the same situation that you were in, 25 years ago, I was walking across Main Street and a lady hit me. I'm in the middle of the road, grabbed my leg, and the cop ride by, and didn't even stop. So traffic's traffic. We don't have traffic like a lot of people have traffic. And I'm very blessed to be in a town that we have traffic problems, if you want to call them traffic problems. Everybody's property value goes up. So I'm in favor of the variance. I'm also in favor of the town council making a move sooner than later on the issues that we are seeing here. And possibly a lot of this could be eliminated. Cut down on staff's time, town council's time, and our time. So sooner or later will be better.
Thank you.
With respect to Mr. Sims, whose opinion I always respect, but I'm going to differ a little bit on the conditions in terms of hours. The reason is that if we do that here, it may or may not impact parking overall because there are other institutions, other operators downtown, both restaurant, non-restaurant, that maybe have full freedom to change their hours of operation at any point in time and can alter the parking situation. So it seems to me potentially unfair to limit one applicant through this process or one operator through this process when everybody else has the freedom to change that. And we don't really solve the parking variance issue that we're all dealing with, which brings me back to Mr. Satterfield's recommendation that this really is something that needs to be addressed at a different venue, town council specifically.
Let me say, first of all, that, of course, I respect yours to the utmost, and you know you're my hero. I want to be like you when I grow up. But I also want to say that the reason why I'm so animated on that is that they put that down as part of, and the way they structured it, where they was looking at the fact that the other operating hours. So for me, and I'm just going by my roots of if you say it, then you need to do it. And if they were putting that out there like, hey, these are some times that would offset, so I'm fine. If you're going to say that, then I want to see you do it. And I agree with you on others, but which we all said, we have to go what's before us right now, and just going before what I have before me. These are some of the things that they put down for what they want to abide by.
Mr. Satterfield?
I'm going to respectfully disagree with you.
That's no problem at all.
The reason being is things change. Restaurant hours change. I know your hours have changed here and there. Things happen to the economy, hours change. And tying this restaurant into set hours to where they can't be there an hour or two shorter or an hour longer if they needed to be, where the competition in town could be. Because due time into the hours right now, and they, instead of closing at 11 and they have no business that night and they want to close at 10 o'clock, they can't. So I'm against that. Well, sometimes I like to go home early too.
Any further discussion before we entertain a motion? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, just again to review, 4 votes are needed to approve a variance. Need to be clear on the record which 5 members are the regular members that will be making the decision tonight.
Okay. So our 5 voting members, Mr. Perricone, myself, Mr. Casey, Mr. Satterfield, Mr. Sims, will all be voting tonight. And I would just ask whoever would like to put a motion forward, that they do so using the document we have before us. And I think it's important to read the entire motion as written for the record.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion, after considering the competent material and substantial evidence presented, including the application of materials of record, I'll move to approve variance application number 2021-40-VAR. This motion is based on the following findings. Number one, unnecessary hardship does not result from the strict application of the ordinance, or unnecessary hardship, unnecessary hardship does result from the strict application of the ordinance. Number two, the hardship results from conditions that are particular to the property, such as location, size, or topography. And number three, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. And number four, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved.
We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second? Mr. Satterfield, seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I was in favor, Chrissy, as well. Motion carries. I'd like to thank staff as well as the applicant. With that, we've been going now about an hour and 40 minutes. If no one objects, I'd like to call a 10-minute recess, and then we'll move into our training session.
Thank you.
So what?